Hey everybody, Wallaby Mage is back once again with another exciting video essay for your viewing pleasure. Today's topic is a complex one of intrigue and mystery and fascination. Picture this. The year is 1989. It's South Korea. The Sixth Republic of South Korea. An important era of Korean history is underway. A time of cultural revolution and global relevance is just starting to get underway in the country. In 1987, the June democracy movement happened. This was basically a shift in Korea from military autocracy to democracy. The Olympics happened in '88, so, Korea's coming out on the world stage. North and South Korea become a part of the UN in a couple of years. The Soviet Union is about to fall in '91. Important time in Korea. Positive changes are happening. Economic change is happening. The country is becoming more exposed to the world. Meanwhile, during the time, there's another diaspora of Korean people, right? Korean people are leaving the country a little bit more, coming back and forth, and this causes the country to be exposed to American music and American cultural stuff, right? Along with this comes a lot of very interesting musical influences. So today, we're going to talk about everyone's favorite uniquely South Korean art form, and the way it was birthed into this cruel, cold, unforgiving world, becoming a warm bastion of light and hope to all peoples of this dire, grim, sad planet. That's right. Today we're going to be talking about Korean rap. Originally, I thought this video was going to be about the transgressiveness of hip-hop in the face of the autocratic and militaristic Fifth Republic of South Korea. But it turns out I actually missed the fall of the Fifth Republic by a couple of years. You see, it went down in '87, and the first Korean rap song, Kim Sat Gat, by Hong Seo Boom, was produced in '89. So dates don't quite line up there. The good news is the real juicy pork chop of Korean rap and its history is that language development happens because of hip-hop. These Korean rappers have literally, over the course of a couple decades, figured out an entirely new way to use their language. Introduced a concept entirely foreign to the Korean language into their body of work and mastered it. It's really impressive stuff, and we'll get into brass tacks right now. We're not going to wait. To understand Korean rap, you need to first understand two things: Korean language and rap music. Big surprise there, am I right? So here's the basic suburban white guy, not really an expert version of an explanation of how rap basically works. There are basically three components to take into account for this essay. There are beats, there are bars, and there are rhymes. We will explain rhyme last, but for now, the mechanical bit, the beat and the bar. The beat is a beat. Here's a dictionary explanation of what a beat is, because my brain is too small To explain what a beat is to you, a bar is a collection of 4 and sometimes 5 beats. It can be helpful to think of it the way you were taught high school poetry. That is, poetry governed by a meter. The same way poetry can be governed by a meter, a bar is the meter that governs rap music. Now, this governing can get a little loosey-goosey sometimes, resulting in what can either be avant-garde high-form art or avant-garde high-form stuff. Which artist creates which, I will leave up to your distinctive taste as opposed to insulting anyone specifically. Now, rhyme is the stuff that you put in a bar that sounds like the stuff in the next bar or the bars after that. There are several different types of rhymes. There are external rhymes, that is to say, rhymes on the end of your bar / meter, basically at the end here. There are internal rhymes, which can be rhymed either with other internal rhymes congruent to them, or they can be rhymed effectively, in some cases, to external words. There are single syllable rhymes, where you rhyme one syllable to a syllable in the next bar. There are multi-syllable rhymes, which can be, just single words with 2 syllables that sound the same, rhymed together. There are massive complex rhymes that have multi-words or multi-syllables put together or pronounced strangely to make the 2 phrases or words rhyme from bar to bar. There's a quote from Rakim, who is an artist I haven't listened to a lot, but he's very influential in the way he created his art. And the way he put it is, when he's done with his work, there's nothing else that can go inside a bar, right? There's no other set of syllables that works right. And you don't quite get that necessarily when you have really simple stuff. And that is where I think rap becomes a really higher form of art, in that it's really challenging to make a complex multi-syllable rhyme, especially when you're properly metered out. A lot of poetry in the English-speaking world is not metered out. Some of it is, and I've heard arguments for which is better or which is worse, but rap is metered out. An artist who creates rap music has to take the beat and the bar into account, or they're not rapping, right? They're just talking fast to hip-hop music. Poetry doesn't have that. If you strip away from English poetry the rhyme, the proper flow, the beat and the bar of poetry, right? The AABB type of structural stuff, which rap can have too. You just have a more abstract form of poetry. You take it away from rap, and you have what Korean rap sounded like in the early 90s. Now I know what you're thinking. Walter, man, come here. Come closer. Dude, I don't think that was rap. I think that might have just been talking fast over hip-hop music. To which I say, slow your roll, verbal gent. Take it easy. Take 2 deep breaths and 4 shallow ones, and then 1 somewhere in the middle, and then try not to be conscious that you are breathing. You see, before this point, the concept of rhyme was more or less foreign to Korean language. As a basic explanation, Korean is a verb-ending language. So the verbs go at the end of the sentence, in the structure of the sentence. To make this make sense, imagine if every sentence you said had to end in ing or ed. It's not quite as simple as that, but it makes you understand how rhyming doesn't really come across as impressive, especially more simple rhymes, being as you're always ending on the same syllable anyway. It's like rhyming bog, dog, frog, log, hog, right? You can sure rhyme all those words together, but it definitely isn't very impressive. Now, you've seen Hangseo Boom and tasted the full force of his mighty gat as it filled you with the bullets of his intellectual musings, his poetry, his wise, wandering philosophy. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, wow, what was that you just said to me, Walter? That made no sense. But let me tell you, what I wish you were thinking was, man, Walter, wouldn't you tell me how they got around this huge language barrier? And that, my friends, is where Pamal comes in. Pamal, which I hope I'm saying right, is half-speak. It is casual Korean. Korean has a lot of different levels of politeness and vocabulary. Extremely polite Korean has a lot more stuff added into its sentences to make it more crisp and polite, but it's a longer sentence. Pamal is the way you talk to your friend, or your sibling, or somebody you want to make feel insulted by talking to them as though they were a child. And I'm not kidding, my wife is laughing over there, but it's not a joke. And it is an excellent tool for making rhyme easier. Now, not all of that weighty conjugation that makes verbs so hard to use as rhymes in Korean is gone, but a lot of it is, and it's easier to work around. And building on the foundation of this shorthand of language, Korean rappers were able to begin making more complex rhymes. It's impressive to listen to. I'm not a huge technical language expert. I find it fascinating, but I'm much more interested in the way it sounds as it evolves over the years. The first big jump you see is with groups like CO Taiji and Boys and Ukes. This actually suits our purposes really well, because you can see an example of more basically single syllable rhymes up here in the first set of bars, and in the second set of bars you can see more complex multi-syllable rhymes. Now, it's nothing groundbreaking, but they are rhyming pretty much whole words here. The quality of their rhymes, as far as I can tell, actually seems to improve over the course of their career. If nothing else, the takeaway is that CO Taiji and his band of merry boys have figured out how to rhyme in a way that is recognizable to a Western listener. To illustrate the full potential of these true-to-form early 90s Korean hip-hop artists, I'd take their work and I'd hold it next to the work of Biggie Smalls. If you look at Biggie Smalls' discography, a lot of his works have a sort of signature smoothness to them. However, most of these same works don't have the most complex multi-syllable rhymes. Now, he has some songs that have slightly more complex rhymes in them, but a lot of his best work was done with simple 1 or 2 syllable rhymes chained together in a clever way. Think of it this way. Each bar is made up of 4 beats. What Biggie Smalls would do to chain his bars together is he would have typical rhymes happening on the end of his bars, but also have a rhyme in the middle of his bar that rhymed with the next set of bars. So he'd have one rhyming scheme flow seamlessly into the next rhyming scheme. As far as I've seen, and I'm not an expert on their body of work, CO Taiji and Boys, at least in the early 90s, don't quite get to that point of a complicated bar, right? A complicated scheme. They're not just talking quickly over hip-hop beat or always rhyming with the same word, which is something that happens in Korean hip-hop. I will spare you the pain of listening to any of it, but there are numbers where the rhymes are either incidental or they're done on purpose, but they sound incidental because they're just ending the phrase with the same word again and again and again. To a listener inexperienced and unfamiliar with the Korean language, you filthy couch potatoes, this might not seem like a huge advancement in linguistics at all. But to go back to what I said before, understanding Korean hip-hop requires not just an understanding of hip-hop and what makes it work, but an understanding of the Korean language. And to really understand why this introduction of rhyme is a big deal, you need to look at Korean poetry. Now, if you head over to the Literary Translation Institute of Korea YouTube page, you can get a pretty good earful of Korean poetry and how it functions. And you'll notice that there's an emphasis on meter and an emphasis on emotional delivery, and that it doesn't cease to be poetry for the lack of rhyme. So it makes sense that Korea might go its entire history without ever picking up rhyme. All the mechanical difficulties of incorporating rhyme into the Korean language put aside, Korean language and the cultural institutions that employ it don't really lose out on a lot from not having rhyme implemented. When you listen to these authors and various persons passionately delivering these poems, you don't miss out on the experience because there's no rhyme in it. It makes sense that rhyme doesn't need to be added into the mix. You don't get that same experience when you listen to Kim Sat-gat. Kim Sat-gat sounds like it's missing something. CO Taiji in Boys does not. Where you see the evolution toward using more complex words for rhyme is in the late 90s with groups like Drunken Tiger and BLEX, especially BLEX. Some members of BLEX went on to be very successful in different groups.
있어 그래서 널 잊기로 했어 영원히 너 같은 여자는 만나진 않을 거야 네가 나 떠나가기 전에 내가 버려지기 전에 내가 먼저 하하 널 잊을 거야.
But by the time you get to the 2000s, rappers are using rhymes. Now it's more common, or I should say very common, across all Korean musical genres to, when rhyming, use English words to rhyme. Because it's easier to rhyme from Korean to English. Because English has a lot of words that you can use to rhyme, and Korean has far more limited amounts of conjugates, right? And that brings us to the release of Verbal Gent's Modern Rhymes in 2007. Verbal Gent, as an important aside, is a good bit proficient in the English language, having participated in the KAT USA program while serving his mandatory military service, a program reserved for those proficient in English. It shows that he has an understanding of the language and can rhyme really, really well. When you look at his work, he's got more complicated rhymes. Here's a clip from Overclass.
Yo, shit is straight from the streets of Seoul. 좀 더 비켜서 너희들의 공력이 있어도 낭비할 시간이 없다고 날 이기려면 기분부터 바로 배워야 할 텐데 하는 꼴을 보니 날 새네 너희가 몇 말 때문에 고민할 때네 플로우는 깊어만 가는데 날 이겨낸다는 게 너희들로선 거의 불가능해 가깝다는 건
As you can see here, Verbal Gent has created music that is all the way up to Western standard as far as rhyme goes. He's got complex rhymes on the end here. He's got internal rhymes. Truly impressive stuff. He's even got some of that old-timey Korean classic of rhyming English to Korean, which to me, doesn't bring down the quality of his work, because rather than simply being a cheap cop-out, you still see the internal rhymes and the complex rhymes like you didn't see a lot of in older Korean music. If you look at Seo Taiji and Boys by comparison, their focus is more on the rhyming of syllables and conjugates as opposed to whole phrases rhyming, and typically lacks the internal rhyme like you see in Verbal Gent's work. Now, where you see this evolved even further comes from a more modern work. 2013's The Bangerz from a group called Soul Company. Now, I mentioned BLEX before, the Black Cloud Explorers, as they are called unashamedly in Korean. And some of them are with this group. And they've really, really evolved the formula.
힙합 Bangerz 가라사대 그대 손이 애종이 펜을 울리게 곧 이제 가슴팍에 따분하게 가둔 나의 작은 바람은 한국말의 그 바람 안에 가득하게 담은 차례.
I think what really can't go understated with this track isn't just the amazingness of its rhyme, but that it marries Korean sensibility of meter, the stylings of Korean poetry, with really sophisticated rap and rhyme, utilizing internal rhymes as well as sophisticated multi-syllable rhymes, while lining up the syllables like traditional Eastern poetry. I think that it's easy not to recognize that on a single viewing. I've personally have listened to this track many, many times now, and I can't get enough of it. It's an amazing track, and it's a testament to how far language has been advanced through hip-hop. And this Soul Company group that I just showed you has members from BLEX in it. A lot of names, a lot of people who have been studying language for decades now. And it shows in their ability to make a composition like this. There's a difference when you listen to something that's beautiful that was made by an amateur and something beautiful that is the sign of years of mastery. Both can be good. Both can be a product that you enjoy, but one of them is going to be truly something else. And I think that Soul Company's music is something else, especially this track. This music impresses me. It is a feat of language that requires incredible bilingual ability to engineer in the first place. To get to this point, it took something amazing. And I think it's a tragedy that this is not a more talked about subject. If you're interested in talking about this subject, then what I suggest you do is take a look around online. It can be a little hard to get over the first bump, the first layer, but there's a lot of Reddit discussion about people who have an interest in Korean music, if you can stand the vapid toxicity of Reddit. And there are a lot of sites, and I'll include them in the description, that I visited that are dedicated to the discussion of Korean hip-hop and Korean history, as well as many that are dedicated to Korean culture in general. And that's really what I want to do with this video. I want you to watch what I've done here and be like, huh, so there's something more to Korean music. And then go listen to Korean music. Or be like, oh wow, so like this is an entirely new era in Korean politics that has been instrumental to all of these musical movements that have happened in Korea that have exported to the globe. Why wasn't it like that before in Korea? And then go read about Korean history, which is shockingly more difficult to do than I intended. I tried to find books on it at my local library, and they just want to talk about that war that happened like 50 years ago. Like, come on, people. There's more history between now and then. You can read a lot about K-pop, because like that's what's cool with the kids these days. And the ungrateful wives who watch BTS twerk their skinny little Asian asses on the stage.
Excuse you.
Excuse me indeed, woman. Woman.
Rude.
Yes, it is rude. The only ass she should be watching twerk is mine.
You shouldn't twerk, baby. Nobody should twerk. It's a cursed thing. Nobody.
Anyway, I hope you really liked the video, guys. It was a really messy process getting to this point. I enjoyed the musical part of the research, but trying to understand a foreign language to me is like if you tried to feed a brick through a meat grinder at like a sausage shop, and then also tried to stuff a sausage with that same ground brick, and then made your wife try and eat the ground brick after you baked it on a pan. Like, I am not at a stage in my life when learning a new language comes easy, but I hope that I have expressed the basics of it well enough for you to understand. I do intend to revisit Hangul and the Korean language as a topic in the future, and I'll probably discuss Korean history as an attachment to a future video that I have distantly in the works that hopefully won't take me too long to get to. Like if you liked, subscribe for the vibe. Thank you so much for your time, and special thanks to my Patreon donors, DKS1 and this guy who totally isn't my brother. And special thanks to all you viewers. If you want to support this channel and help me continue to make more content in the future, please feel free to check out my Patreon. Leave $1, leave a like, click that bell, I guess is a thing. Argue about socialism in the comments of a video. Whatever. Just if you can interact with me on YouTube, that'll help me out. If you got $1 to throw away, That'll help me buy new equipment and make a better product and get people who have standards interested in paying me money. That was a really long-winded joke. I apologize. It was at your expense, no less. Anywho, like if you liked, subscribe for that vibe, and comment right away, this second, please. Argue about socialism in the comments. It really makes my day. The interaction is what builds these channels. So your presence is as valuable as dollar bills. If you are interested in participating in the poll for my end of Pride Month video, it'll be out on my Patreon at the end of the month. All it'll take is $1 of your contribution to participate in this poll and decide my future. It's the little donations that count. And if you can't afford it, that's okay. Like I said, socialism is there. It's a thing. Argue about it in my comment section. It makes my day. Thank you once again. Have a wonderful day. Peace, yo.